Hello, everyone. Welcome to the series Mud Talks, Yin and Yang, Perspectives of Two Women STEM Leaders from Academia and Industry, with Kathy French, class of 1997, and Liz Orwin, class of 1995. Vanessa Chu is out of town, so I'll be your host for today. My name is Erin McNabb, Associate Director in the Office of Alumni and Parent Relations and proud member of the class of 2006. We thank you for attending today's event. This talk is being recorded and will be distributed after the event. Please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy and Liz to tell you their stories. First, let's start with you, Liz. Take it away.
Great, thanks, Erin. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you all for coming and spending your evening with us, listening to a little bit of our experiences. So, Kathy and I had a lot of fun putting this together, so I hope you enjoy it. So we thought we'd start kind of sharing a little bit of our background story so you have an idea of where our perspectives are coming from. So I actually was born and started out in the UK, and I moved over to the US when I was about 10 years old. I lived in Wyoming and California before I came to MUD. And when I came to MUD, I thought as an undergrad, I thought I was going to be a physics major, and it took me about 30 seconds to figure out I wasn't a physics major, and a year and a half to settle on engineering. So, and every choice I made after then was sort of the choice that preserved the most breadth, right? So I was an engineer because it was general engineering, and then I was a bioengineer. So I went off to University of Minnesota and I got a graduate degree in biomedical engineering. Worked at a startup company, and I often tell people I got bitten by the teaching bug in grad school. A couple of important things happened to me in grad school. One is I got into teaching, and the other is I started my family. So I started my kid in had a first kid in grad school. I came back to MUD in 2001 to be a faculty member, brand new faculty member. So I came back for more. And I was there for 20 years as a faculty member in various roles, including chair of the engineering department for about 7 years. And now I'm Dean of the School of Engineering and Computer Science at University of the Pacific in Stockton, California, which is North Central Valley, California. So that's me and my story, and I'll pass it off to Kathy to tell you hers.
Thank you, Liz. So much like Liz, I'm really excited to be here and really appreciative of everybody who showed up to hear about our stories. So I also moved around a lot. MUD was the longest I was ever in a single school system. So it held an extra special place of just, I didn't have to make new friends at MUD. I got to keep those. I started as a frosh whip, but grew up mostly in New Mexico, came to MUD, and from there, I had a single environmental engineering class at MUD, and that just changed everything for me. I knew I went into MUD wanting to be an engineer. I decided that in the 7th grade. But that single environmental engineering class, this is my career, but I didn't think I could do it. So I went and got a master's degree in environmental engineering because I didn't think anybody would hire me with one class. Turns out I was wrong on that fact. But Drexel University for a master's in environmental engineering, I got started working for pipe manufacturing, and as that company started to go bankrupt, found LS Power on monster.com of all places. And yesterday was my 22nd anniversary with LS Power, where I rose all the way up through the ranks, and now I'm the vice president of environmental. I have 103 power plants that I am generally responsible for, and a staff of 16 people. And I cover a wide variety of battery, solar, hydro, wind, gas, oil, and landfill gas to renewable natural gas. So putting my MUD education to full work. So Liz, curious what you would say some of the most important leadership skills are you've had as you've progressed up and around.
Yeah, for me, the most important leadership skill that I've needed is empathy. And I sort of think that's a combination of listening and caring, right? To think, one of the things that I've realized over time is when people get really upset about stuff, it's because they care, right? And just sort of figuring out why, trying not to take things personally, and instead sitting and listening, why is this person upset? What is the root cause of it? Where is this coming from? And really just trying to put myself in their position and try to understand what it is that's really going on. And that's served me really well so far. And it's different. I mean, one of the things we'll talk about is the differences between between academia and industry. For a long time, the people I was leading, I wasn't really their boss. I mean, leading faculty is a very different thing, right? You're leading your peers. And so I think that requires a different set of skills, right? You really have to try to figure out, what is it that's going on? And empathy was the biggest thing, I would say. What about you, Kathy?
So I would tend to say having a little bit of spine, because I manage people who are quite a bit older than I am. They have more experience because, I have a chief dam safety engineer. She's got 6 years of civil engineering behind her. And I can't pretend to do the math that she does because I've never had any training in it. And so I have to be able to stand up and, we are not going this direction. We are going to go this direction. If there's no safety or other principle, and so I wind up, I play a lot of enforcer, unfortunately, but it's, I definitely start with the listening. You have to hear what all the sides are, critically think about it, but I need to be able to stand up and hold firm on positions very frequently.
Yeah, can I add to that?
Absolutely.
One other thing I would say that's helped me a lot is you get a lot of requests and a lot of things happening and a lot of decisions to make all of the time. And to me, I kind of call this my mirror test, right? So I have to make sure I have a strong sense of right and wrong, and I have to be able to stand up and look myself in the mirror, look myself in the eye, and know that I'm doing the right thing. Because sometimes you have to make tough decisions, sometimes you don't have all the information, right? And you aren't 100% sure, but that I kind of have this sort of gut check, ethics check with myself. Am I doing more good here than not good, and is this the right thing to do? So I feel like that's an important skill to have, is to be able to sort of sit with yourself and know at some level what the right thing to do is.
It's funny you say that. One of my favorite leadership books is Best Damn Ship in the Navy by Captain Michael Abrashoff. And that's the way he phrases that same thing is the Washington Post test of, if this decision was on the headline of the Washington Post, would you be okay with it? Mm-hmm. And so it's very similar, mirror test or Washington Post, but that's another principle I absolutely live by of, would I be okay if this came out in print?
Right. Any other leadership skills you want to share before we move on?
I would say one of the biggest ones, and this is a good one as engineers, we have to make decisions without all the information. We've got to just decide something and move on. We can't sit there and stall and wait or spend another couple $100,000 studying the analysis. It's, let's figure out what we know, where we are, and make the decision. And I frequently feel like I'm back in E54 lab of just okay, my clock is at 6 hours, and after the first 3 hours, I've got to come up with my plan for this study and just make the decision, move on, so I can start writing and doing math and everything else. And it's very critical for us to just be decisive as to what we're doing. And that's not a set in stone. We're allowed to change our minds if more information comes back later, but we can't just waffle all day long.
I really stand by that as well. I think decisive leaders are really helpful leaders, because if you are asking a leader for advice and they're like, well, it could be this or this, and you don't know which one is helpful, a decisive leader can be so helpful in progressing things forward, right? That's what I like. So I'm kind of curious, where do you guys think you got these leadership skills in your life?
So I'm happy to start off with that. I think one of the things I often tell students is that leadership skills can be found in surprising places. So as I look back and think about the things that I've needed, as early as, elementary school, anything with a team, any kind of group endeavor, the Girl Scouts, the choir, whatever it is that you're in, whenever you're working with a group of people, working on communication skills, even if you don't have the title, I feel like, I sort of picked up a lot along the way. I was ASHMIC president my senior year, surprising amount of helpful skills developed in that year. I was so thankful that I went to a school where I could have that opportunity, that leadership opportunity as, a 22-year-old or whatever. I learned a lot of skills, and I sat down once a week with Hank Riggs during that year and just sort of talked through stuff, and just his advice was really, really helpful. So there are lots of places that you can get skills, but I'll just stop there and let Kathy talk a little bit. Go ahead, Kathy.
So I definitely support that and recommend finding a safe space to learn some of those skills. I became president of my Society of Professional Engineers chapter in St. Louis, and started to have monthly meetings that I had to organize. And it was a safe space to screw up running a meeting or realize, yeah, this style of agenda doesn't work, and just really learn how to do that so I could learn to do very efficient meetings, which I've been told industry versus faculty are totally different when it comes to efficient meetings.
I do my best.
But yeah, just find a safe group to actually practice some of these skills on and move them forward. And that's something I force on all of my team under me is, okay, you guys are going to run the Friday meetings now. And that way you get experience keeping people under control and finding nice, pleasant ways to cut them off, or whatever the case happens to be.
Yep. Yeah, and I agree. I think a lot of these things, one other thing that I learned on this scope is that, these leadership skills are it's a sort of a lifelong learning process. It's a continuous learning process. And with that comes, I think, a really important thing for me, at least. I mean, I think many of us probably on this call or in the MUD community are a little bit of overachievers, maybe a little bit of perfectionistic nature, but I have had to learn how to have some patience with myself and to think about this leadership journey as a journey of continuous improvement for myself. So, and cut myself some slack for when I don't get it perfect, right? You don't get it perfect. You try a thing and you learn a thing and you try it. And if it, if it's helpful, you might have to modify, and you're so just even adjusting my mindset to thinking of this whole thing as a journey and I'm trying to continuously improve on has helped me a lot, not beat myself up for when I felt like I wasn't quite 100% doing everything right,
And I definitely support that. I love to read leadership books, and have found, I read one over Christmas. He's actually a CMC grad, and I loved his work, Patrick Lencioni or something like that. And I read this book and realized, where the company or the job the company was expecting of me, my personality is all wrong for what they want. And we have a complete 100% mismatch. And it wasn't, I knew I wasn't doing the job, but I couldn't figure out why. And it took reading, the 6 types of working genius to go, oh, square peg, round hole. We got to rethink this.
Mm-hmm. That actually makes me think of one other thing that I think is really important is I think if you're in a leadership role and you think you're doing it all by yourself, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. For me, it's all about having a team and having a team that has different skills than you and recognizing where your strengths are and where their strengths are. And there are a number of tools out there to help you do that. But to think of yourself as a team and where do you have energy and strength and where do you have weaknesses, I think is a really important thing, because you're not working in isolation, and you always have people that you're working with and you have people that can do certain things better than you can, which is great. You don't have to have all the answers and be everything and be perfect at everything to be a leader.
Well, and I think another critical piece, and we hear it all the time, but much like you had Hank Riggs with ASHMIC, having a mentor. The senior vice president for tax at LS Power, I would not have survived the first decade without her, because I'd have one of those days or one of those conversations, or somebody'd call me out in an email, and I'd just go into her office and go, what do I do with this? How do you deal with it? And she was 15 or so years older than me, and so she'd lived through some of these things and had some ideas of here's how you can navigate it. And so I just finding those mentors, and they can be in your field or out of your field, but just somebody who's lived a little bit of life and can offer you a different perspective on how to deal with things.
I think mentors are hugely important. And I found that it's really helpful. It's helpful to have mentors in your space, but it's also helpful to have mentors that have nothing to do with anything, so that you can go and describe a situation without fear of worrying that people are going to find out that you've been talking about it, right? So people outside of your organization to sort of bounce ideas off of. And since we're in this, I have to just say one thing, is that mentors can also be found in surprising places. And perhaps this isn't a surprise for everybody, but I will say one of my strongest mentors that I have had in my career is Eric Spute. And I was scared to death of the man as a student. And he was just such an amazing mentor and supporter for me when I was chair in engineering at Harvey Mudd, that I just have to say that sometimes a mentor falls out of the sky at you, and you wouldn't necessarily, and that happens. And so those are wonderful things.
Didn't he go on to teach rocketry as a class?
He taught rocketry as a class, and yeah.
So falling out of the sky seems about appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
I don't think he's on the call.
So if we're thinking about being leaders, what would you say are some of the challenges you've experienced in leadership roles, and how you've navigated those challenges?
Do you want to start, Kathy, or would you want me to start?
Sure. So I think this is a pretty common one for a lot of Mudders and a lot of Mudd women, but the imposter syndrome of just, you made it into the room. Am I really good enough to be in here? And how do I manage that or deal with that? And one of the things I did early on, and I just don't have the time to do it anymore, massively over-prepared. Just, okay, I'm going to memorize all these regs. I'm going to have all these facts at my fingertips. And that way, no matter what question was thrown at me, it was almost like a pop quiz in school for every meeting I'd go to with management, of just, I have to be perfect on these answers. And that way, I felt like I belonged in the room. And it took a long time for me to realize I've earned my place at the table, and I don't need all the answers right on the spot. I'm allowed to go back and research things. So that's how I got through a lot of it. But I have to say, the owner of our company was also very incredible, because the first time I got invited to an investor meeting, and we're looking at spending $1 billion or something, and I'm sitting in the corner, and he said, well, why are you in the corner? We need your voice at the table. It was kind of the sheer panic. And so finding someone who will cheerlead for you, but a way to get past the imposter syndrome, because you've earned that seat.
Yeah, that one was a little bit more challenging for me, because I went back to the belly of the beast, right? So left Harvey Mudd and then went right back, which had a lot of mental baggage for me, but I got there eventually. I would say one of the big challenges for me has been, and maybe this kind of goes hand in hand with that last one, is being underestimated. So, people didn't expect much from me. And then I would get a lot of, this is not okay. She can do this, she can do that. Right. And especially, I had that somewhat internally to the places that I've worked, but also, you go to a conference, and you introduce yourself as the engineering chair from Harvey Mudd or the engineering dean from Pacific, and people apparently I don't look like what that person is supposed to look like. And so, there's been a lot of that. I wish I had a nickel for every surprise to wipe surprise off a face that I have seen with that. And so, I don't quite know what to do with that one, because usually it comes in the form of a compliment, like, oh, you're competent, but
a backhanded compliment.
Yeah, it's a little
I
bit
expected you to be dumber. And it's like, that's not nice.
We didn't expect much from you, and you turned out to be pretty good. And I think on part of that, one of the things that we talked about when we were first talking about this is one of the questions we'd originally written was, what does leadership skills look like? And I think, to me, one of the biggest challenges has been, I don't make it easier for myself, but apparently someone who looks like me, they don't expect what comes out of my mouth, so so that's been a challenge. and I just acknowledge it, usually laugh it off. And then, once people get to know you, you just kind of run with it. But it's definitely been a challenge.
And I think that kind of goes along with that, not being heard, of just, okay, how do I get my voice heard? Because what I've got to say is material and important and really matters to what's being discussed. And, when you're talking about investing, hundreds of millions of dollars, if I've got something critical to say, I need to have the confidence to speak up. And that took a lot for me to learn to do, of just, okay, throw it out there. I would proofread it like 5 times before I'd send it. But it just, just the, okay, deep breath, I can hit the send key. What I'm saying is important because I do know the most about this in the company. Yep. And so typically my biggest problem about not being heard was the fear I held within myself.
Yeah. Yeah. One other one, it probably goes along with what sort of what I was saying before, but I have found that the line between too soft and too aggressive is very thin and sometimes non-existent. And so, I think as a female leader, it's particularly challenging, right? So how do you make sure your voice is heard and you have a strong voice? But I'm constantly thinking about not coming off as too aggressive, right? Because that shuts people down. And so it's, that one's been a challenge. And you find ways to navigate it, but I think it's important to acknowledge that. And I think it's helpful to acknowledge any of these challenges. I think is helpful for any of you on the call who are embarking on leadership journeys. It's like, I think it's helpful to know that some of these things exist. And I've just tried to be really open. I am who I am, and I've been really open in all of my jobs, and I think that's what I do to try to combat that. It's like, this is who I am. And, I'm not, and I try to, when we're doing things, I'm try to be really transparent so that people know why we're doing the things that we're doing. And then you get less of the sort of like, she's just pushing things through, or she's too aggressive, or all of those. Right?
And I think in industry, that's a little bit different because my number 2 in my group, I play the bad cop. It fits our personalities better. And so I go in as the enforcer and grouchy and mean and just, I am going to tear them upside down if they don't get their act together. And, he comes in as the soft, gentle person of, we can pacify her and we can make her happy. And so, especially in the power industry, it's a lot of former military. I don't tend to have the too aggressive as being, I don't think I've had anyone say I've ever been too aggressive, because it's typically called for. We're screwing up the environment, or we've got an unsafe situation. But I have an amazing partner in my number 2 that I can read the riot act, and he goes in and soothes everybody's fears.
Yeah, I think it's important. That made me think, I think it's important for us to retain who we are and our own personalities, and not try to change them to fit, this notion of what a leader should look like, where people are different, and they should embrace that as they go into this, right?
Yeah, well, we were talking the word confidence. We haven't ever said it yet as far as like important leadership skills. Is confident. You mentioned spine, Kathy, and maybe that's part of it. But I also wonder if confidence sometimes comes off aggressive to some people, right? That's how they might read a confident woman in a room. So I never think of myself as a confident person, but I think if you come off confident, it actually goes really far in people like believing you as like a leader.
But I also think it's a fine line on that, because there are 25-year-olds who come in as confident. Right. And I go, okay, put that in check, because you do not get to tell us the direction of the company at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to say, confidence, I think, is a really important thing. And it's something that I've struggled with a lot over my career and sort of have built over time, right? But I think for me, it kind of goes along with the imposter syndrome stuff we were talking about before. I think for many of us, you land in these positions and you're like, gosh, how am I gonna do this? And I've leaned back on my Harvey Mudd degree a lot, because I have the following conversation with myself. And I did this when I became chair at Mudd. That's probably the most terrified I've ever been in my entire life. And I sat myself down and said, you graduated from Harvey Mudd, you made it through that. If you made it through that, you can make it through this. And so, I mean, I have those little conversations with myself. So I think that helps. But yeah, I think confidence is key. You got to have it. And it's sort of, again, part of the mirror test. You have to have this sort of inner, I know I'm doing the right thing, right? And that helps me with that confidence.
It's funny you say that. I also go, I survived Mudd. This is easy.
Yep.
So audience, please feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A box. We'll be taking them as we continue our discussion. I kind of wanted to talk specifically as women in your fields in both industry and academia, how you found to motivate or change cultures that support other women maybe in your field, and that kind of leadership role in your life.
This one for me is super exciting. I mean, this is part of why I do the job, right? Is to sort of figure out, how do you move organizations, right? And I think, you kind of alluded to it, Erin, STEM spaces have not been friendly spaces to all people, historically, right? And so to me, change culture is bigger than that, though. It's sort of like, how do you motivate this continuous improvement mindset that I was talking about before in people in all aspects of what they do? And I think, what I've found is, I work with faculty here and at Mudd, but especially, this is sort of not Mudd necessarily commentary, but a lot of times faculty feel like the curriculum that they develop is something that's sort of chiseled into the stone, right? It's perfect. It is what it is. But the thing is, the world outside is changing. And if we don't change our curriculum to, we need to change and evolve, right? That doesn't mean throw everything out. It just means evolve. And so when I go about trying to motivate change, I try, a lot of strategies, just a lot of listening, and sort of here's what the priorities are, and kind of coming back to the community and getting buy-in for that. But if you're going to run a process like that, you have to run a timeline with it, because otherwise you talk forever, and faculty and staff are very good at talking forever, right? So we could talk a thing to death. So it's sort of like, we're going to do this thing where we're going to talk about what our issues are and come up with our top priorities, but we're going to bound it in this time, and then we're going to work on it, right? So I think, to me, this is, it's a big challenge to motivate change. People are afraid of it. But I think if you can recognize and acknowledge that it's scary, but that, you want to do it in a planned and careful way, then that goes a long way to getting people sort of on board.
And I'm going to take a different angle to this answer, but mine is, I will find one angle of the person, women, underserved, whatever, what do they do really well? And find a way to showcase that higher up the food chain of the, hey, Jessica's going to talk about this 5-minute thing, and, give her the confidence, very narrow subject. She's an expert at it. And I'm there as a safety net if she gets one of those questions that you just can't deal with. And so I break the barrier that I'm giving her the intro that I had to create for myself. But the other thing that I think is critical, and Liz, you and I, we plowed our own ground, but there are still aspects of any career or any place. A person has to pay their dues, and we don't want to make the pay the dues some of the same pain and stupid things that we went through. But if you're going to work in a power industry, you've got to learn to wear steel-toed boots and hard hats all the time. So it's what kind of dues are required. Lay that out so people know this is absolutely necessary. There's no getting around it, but find ways to give them those small wins, to give them the courage and the confidence to then keep speaking up more and more. And that's, I think that's a key thing about leadership is everybody's unique. How do we find the aspect of them that they contribute to the team to really showcase all of their unique skills?
I thought of a question beforehand, and I'm just curious if you've ever thought about if there was a moment in your life, or like you reflect on what you've done where you knew you were a leader, or like you seem to always end up as a leadership position, or you wanted to be a leader. Like, do you remember a moment like that?
So mine was probably middle school of just, there were things I really wanted us to do, and I wanted to get some, shared governance in the school. And so I desperately wanted to get, into student politics, and just absolutely desperately. I do not have the natural charisma to, that's not who I am. I was one of the geeky nerds. And so it did not, me up against one of the cheerleaders, not happening. But, that was the point of I can help effectuate change, but I need to be here to do it. And so I think that was the point. And I got lucky at Mudd of, I got to be a dorm president, I got to be a proctor, and I got those opportunities to really get to experience and go, I love leading. And I just have to find, politics is not going to work. I got to find a mechanism to lead where it's my own people, and they'll take me for who I am.
For me, I would say something similar in terms of, when I was in high school and Mudd as a student, I was always running something. I was always involved in a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm not sure that was really like, I want to lead something. It was just sort of like, oh, I'm really interested in all these things. And I, honestly, I needed something to keep me sane. And so I joined all this, I did all this stuff. So I think for me, that question sort of like, when did I want to sort of get interested in actually saying, I want to get involved in this and develop my leadership skills? I think it wasn't until I landed in the chair job that it was like, okay, because that job is like, a lot of people do that job and go back to the faculty, right? And so you kind of have to make a decision at some point, am I going to keep going on this leadership journey, or am I going to stay where I'm at, which is a great job and I love it, right? And so that was a really kind of hard moment for me. And I think a lot of people have this. I've talked to my brother about this, who's an industry person, but this sort of like, if you're really good at stuff, you end up in a management or a leadership position, and you have this question like, how do you want to leave the science and the engineering behind, or for me, the teaching, to get into some of these places? And in the end of the day, what I came to was, I got really passionate about engineering education and pedagogy and culture change and all this kind of stuff. And if you really want to make a difference, you got to go into some of these leadership roles where you can really make some bigger impact. And to me, the Mudd mission sort of has driven me in my life, right? I'm trying to make a difference with what the education that I got there. And if I really want to do that, that was when I got more intentional about, okay, I really want to do this. What does that look like, right? And try to build my skills to be able to do that. So it was later for me.
Perfect. I didn't like indecisive people, so I decided to be decisive, and that's how I became a leader. We all have our different motivations. Yeah. We've got a comment from the audience. My daughter is going to be in the Mudd class of 2027. She's the only girl in her Cyber Patriot team, one of the few in the STEM spaces in her school. She is the first student in her high school's 44-year history to be admitted to Mudd. She definitely is having a bit of imposter syndrome problem right now. Do you have any advice for me as her mother to help her?
Oh.
I mean, You did it. You got into Mudd, so good on her. Like, good job.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Congratulations.
I think, encouraging her to know that the community and environment at Harvey Mudd now is not the same as it was when we all went there. We're at 50% women in pretty much everything, right? We have a lot of examples of female leaders on campus and female faculty. And so, it's a different kind of environment. So that sort of the only girl in thing hopefully happens a lot less now, right? It does happen a lot less now than it used to. But I would just, people often ask me, what would you tell your 18-year-old self? And I would tell my 18-year-old self that I was better than I thought I was, right? And so tell her that. Tell her, she's better than she thinks. To try to remember to have confidence, to have those little moments with yourself where you sit yourself down and you say, pretty good at what I do, remind yourself on some frequency. And if she can't do that, you as her mom can do that. I do that with my kids all the time. Just remember how good you are, right? Because you forget when you kind of go day to day. So I think taking those little moments for yourself is really important.
And I think I'd go with, the student body's a family. Even when we were only 25% of us, my male dorm mates, if they saw I was struggling, they'd sit down and go, hey, which homework is causing you fits? And, we can help you through this. And so even if the rest of campus hadn't quite caught up, they were always there for me. And so, it doesn't necessarily matter that she's the only one on the team. It's, there's a huge family of other kids like her. And some of them are going to be guys who are having imposter syndrome, but there's just this huge family of everybody who's struggling with the same sort of insecurities or issues. And she just needs to be a little bit vulnerable with her fellow classmates and even with the professors. I can remember as part of ABOG, there being a complaint that the time—
Sorry, Kathy, ABOG is the Alumni Association Board of Governors.
Yeah, that there was a complaint that the time in orientation that the professors got to try and make a connection with the students of, we're here to help you, come visit office hours. It really is a family all the way across the board, and everybody's there to help you succeed. You just have to, shyly raise your hand and I need help. And whether it's your dorm mates or your professors, there's a lot of people who really want you to succeed at MUD. And that, I think, is continuous from our era on up.
Yeah. So congratulations for getting into MUD.
Yes.
That is amazing.
Enormous.
For your student. That's so fantastic. They don't let people who won't thrive here in. So she hopefully will have a great time. We're excited to have her here. We've got more questions. So at what point in your career or confidence in your fund of knowledge did you decide that you're not afraid to fail?
This one's really important. And I don't know that I have fully grasped it. I'm just going to acknowledge that, but I'm better at it than I used to be. So I used to be terrified of failing. And that's a really hard way to live. And I feel like I am much kinder to myself. I have much more patience with myself now than I used to, but I'm a competitive person. You'll ask my kids, they do not like to play Trivial Pursuit with me. Nobody likes it. And so, but because I am, and I'm competitive with myself, but I think it really is key. And this is one of the things I have to constantly remind myself is that we don't learn if we don't fail. Right. And so failure is part of the process. I tell students this all the time, and then I try to get myself to take my own advice. And it's a struggle. That one's one that's really hard, but I think it's really critical.
So depends on the level we're talking about. I'm talking about people's lives. If I screw something up, or I allow something to screw up, I'm truly endangering people's lives on, either individual plant workers or broader within a community. I was at a plant yesterday that, we've got 2 very large anhydrous ammonia tanks. I have a kill zone of about 10 miles if one of those ruptures. And so, I have incredible fear of failure when it's on that bigger scale. But I've had the little errors, and I would say it was probably about 10 to 12 years into the career of okay, if I get an NOV, if EPA finds an error, nobody died, nobody got hurt, we're okay. The environment was not endangered. And so it's a very different answer. It depends on the scale at which failure. And I was reading the autobiography or biography of one of the engineers on the Challenger, and how he lived with the fact he didn't speak up harder on the O-rings, of just, how did he get past that? Or, what did he do to have a failure on such a massive scale? Because that's something I still don't sleep with at night, of, if I have a failure on a massive scale, what do I do?
Yeah. I don't know how to transition to the next question. I am so sorry. I thought about it real hard, guys.
We're
Hard
mothers.
transition to the next one. Liz, how much does being a parent influence your leadership? I couldn't think of a transition.
Okay, good question. Well, it's a little bit hard for me to pull apart leadership and like working in academia job in general with this, but I think it's a two-way street. I think leading and working in an academic space has helped me be a better parent. And I think being a parent has helped me better understand the needs of our students here. And it's sort of a horrifying experience. I think I saw Jerry on here. He'll understand this maybe, but like, you and your mind stay the same age, and these kids kind of grow up around you, right? And all of a sudden, my kids are the same age as, we work on a college campus, you don't even think about your aging, but all of a sudden, my kids are the same age as the college kids, and it's like, this is horrifying. But I think, there's a lot of, I think honestly, I'm a better parent. I listen to my kids better than I would have otherwise. I appreciate their issues better than I would have otherwise, and vice versa, right? Just because I feel like you get a different kind of view into the things that they're thinking about. And, a lot of the leadership skills and parenting skills are, you listen, you try to advise, you try to not screw it up too badly. You try to give yourself a little bit of a break and, not kill yourself over, because you're not going to get it all right. You don't get it all right ever. And patience and all of those things. So I think it's generally been helpful. One thing that makes me think of is we talked a little bit earlier about balance, and we didn't really touch on that. Like one of the sort of challenges of women in leadership and balancing all the things. And so bringing up being a parent is something that just triggered that in my mind. And I mean, anyone who tells you they've got balance figured out is, I don't know. I don't know anybody who has, and I don't claim to have it figured out. I think it's a challenge. You've got, I have a spouse and 3 kids and a job and stuff I like to do outside of all of that, right? And so you got to figure out, I got really good at compartmentalizing, blocking off times for things and giving certain activities a certain amount of time. Because it was really important to me that I showed up and volunteered in kids' classrooms and ran Girl Scout troops and stuff. And so I had to compartmentalize, and I had to do things faster and more efficient. But I have a partner who does that too. And he had this moment when my kids were in elementary school, where he went to school one day. So we had this elaborate switching off thing that went on, and I would go 3 days a week and pick him up, and he would go 2 days a week and pick him up. He came home one day and he goes, I see the problem. He goes, you go there 3 days a week and they're like, where is she? And I go there 2 days a week and I'm dad of the year, right? They think I'm the greatest person. So, you've got these perceptions, but I think it's really important to have a partner and someone who understands that, especially when you start taking on these leadership roles. He has had to step up and do more things on the home front in order to make that happen. And it's been a sort of team effort, right? So it's not easy, but it's doable.
So I do not have kids. I've stayed single, but dealing with my nieces and nephews, listening is what they taught me. And reading between the lines of what they may be telling me may not really be the problem. And I found that made me much better at my employees of the things they're complaining about really isn't the problem. Mm-hmm. And so learning how to listen to them and ferret out, okay, what's going on and why are they calling me in the middle of the night? And, just learning how to listen better and read between the lines is what kids have really taught me how to do far better than to really sharpen my leadership skills.
Kathy, did you want to talk about work-life balance at all?
I have none, so
Yeah, Kathy's not a great pointer.
yeah, I'm a really bad example for that one. So, but the problem is, I really love what I do. I mean, I have fun. It's technically challenging. I feel like I'm doing good for the world most days. And so it just, do I want to go, bowling or something when it's hey, I could work on this hydro plant and figure this out. And so I should not discuss work-life balance.
Great. All right, we've got some more questions coming in from Steve Bordelone. First off, Liz and Kathy were two of the best people I worked with at MUD who were great mentors in industry. Thanks for sharing your time tonight. I'm curious what your thoughts are about fairness, objectivity, and emotional regulation or discipline on your success in leadership roles.
I seriously struggle with regulating my emotions. I definitely can come in too hot or come in too cold, and I have issued more apologies to my team of I was out of line yesterday, my emotions were inappropriate for whatever, and so owning up. And I think my team loves it because they know I'm human, and because I own up for it, then when they have one of those off days, I will also give them the grace of, as long as they own up to it, we both recognize we're human, and certain things will set us off. But I'm much better at keeping it under control. And it's, you take the deep breath, you do a little bit of separation of, give me 5 minutes, let me come back to this. Let me separate and just try and recenter myself. So some of those little techniques have made me much better over the last decade, because I definitely fight with this horrendously.
Yeah, I have been accused of being too emotional. I've decided to take that as like, I care a lot, right? And I do. I do one thing, just to kind of back to my former, and first I have to say hi, Steve. It's good to have you on here. But I think one thing that I've really worked on, and I have this conversation with myself. I have a lot of conversations with myself, don't I? Like, don't cry in meetings, right? I'm not, as a leader,
that's hard sometimes.
It's sometimes that's surprisingly difficult, but it's like, I don't want to be, that's not what I want to do. Right. And so, I think I've gotten much better at being, being me and expressing, I care about this. And I'm like, I'm showing that emotion. And I think, like Kathy said, that shows people you're human. Right. And they need to see that you care, you're invested in this thing that you're doing. And especially coming here and taking on a new role. I mean, it's almost like at Harvey Mudd, it was baked in. Of course I cared. Right. And I'd been there forever. I was really nice piece of furniture or whatever. Right. I mean, of course I cared. But here, you come here to a new place with new people, you have to convince them that you care. And so they have to see that. And I think that's really part of it. I'm not sure what your question is getting at about fairness and objectivity. I don't know if you want to, but I'm not quite sure what that is.
I think I can probably guess. Maybe I'm wrong. Steve, you can correct me. But like, if you're leading a team and you want to be fair to your team members, or prioritizing a project without seeming like favoritism coming out, that's how I read it.
Yeah, to me, if you've done the foundation work of being transparent and you have shared the organization's goals and and everybody knows what it is that you're trying to do, those conversations and decisions get a lot easier because, good job, Erin, got it. Because basically it's like, if you have to make this decision, we're going to spend money here and not here. It's like, well, there's our 5 goals and this thing appears on them and this thing doesn't, we're going to table that for a while, right? So people know what you're doing and where you're going and why you're doing it. It's a lot easier for them to understand when you have to choose one thing over another. And so things seem a lot more fair to everybody because you've been very clear about what it is that we're all trying to do, right? And ideally, you've developed those list of goals together, right? So everybody kind of knows where they came from. They didn't come down from on high, right? That's what I would say about that.
I envy the, process and structure and, a little bit more defined of a path. I just, I guess I sort of look at it like eating my vegetables of, okay, this one person on the team is driving me nuts, but it is time to suck it up and eat the Brussels sprouts. And, I just have to call them and make them feel loved. And, afterwards sometimes I'll do okay, I'm going to take this call outside in my yard. So sitting there listening to the birds and in the sunshine makes it far easier to take the call and thus make them feel like I'm being fair and I'm giving them the same time and love and attention, despite the fact that, deep in my heart, I feel like I'm eating Brussels sprouts.
Can I say one sort of related thing? And this is sort of less on this, but more on like sort of dealing with sort of difficult or people who are frustrated in the organization and who, maybe a little passive aggressive about it. So we did this, again, I'm talking about lifelong learning. We did this training thing, and this was only a couple of months ago, but the facilitator came in and she, sets ground rules for the conversation. And she set a ground rule that I had never thought about, but realized it was the source of an awful lot of strife in our organization, here at least. And she called it no silent dissent. So if you're going to be in this meeting and we're going to talk about something and you don't say anything, the assumption is you're on board. The assumption is, so what was happening is a lot of people sitting there don't say anything, and then they go away and undermine all the stuff. And you don't know because you've just had this meeting and you think everybody's all happy with whatever it is you're discussing. So that has changed. Like I have a core leadership team here that has changed how we interact. Now, if they know, if they don't say anything, I'm assuming we're going for it, right? So now people talk, which is good.
Does it make for feistier meetings? I mean,
a little bit, but I mean, we did a whole bunch of sort of expectation setting. This is how we're going to behave in this group together. And that helped a lot because then it was sort of like everybody's voice is valued. We're not going to have this silent dissent thing. We're going to, there's sort of set of rules. And so it's actually it's changed the dynamic of the meeting completely. People are far less afraid because it's like, look, we're going to discuss this thing. Right.
Right.
And I've been learned to be clearer about what things I'm asking for input on and what things I'm asking for decisions on, because not everything is that group's decision. And it was a little bit unclear. So clarifying the expectations plus this no silent dissent thing has just changed the whole tenor of that meeting for the better.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, if you're setting up that kind of rule, you kind of have to agree that you're not going to get mad at someone for dissenting, right? So,
right. And we want to hear it. I mean, and it's,
right.
Hopefully people aren't screaming at each other, and we haven't had any screaming, but, people should speak up and say, hey, I don't like this, and here's why I don't like it, right?
Yeah. Tracy Powell, I see your great little note. Thank you. She mentions mentoring as far as including mud mentoring, which it has kind of been a thing for some time. Some programs have lasted, some programs haven't. And she's happy to chat with us about Mentor Loop, which is something she works with, which is great. So thank you, Tracy. Steve Bordelon, thank you. Really interesting, great discussion. Thank you. I have one final little quip. How do you feel about the phrase like a good leader is a good follower situation? How do you think that is actually true?
No.
Great.
Because you identify in that other leader things that you would fix and you would not let be going silent, and trying not to step on their toes or inflame or infuriate them by looking like you're taking over. And so trying to secretly lead is really, really challenging. And so no, I disagree with that completely.
But Kathy, you follow in other situations. Like you can follow.
I would rephrase it. Rephrase it. A good leader. So you said a good leader is a good follower. I would say is a good team member. If you're a good team member, You know what I mean? So I guess I think it's the word follow that Kathy's taking issue with, but that's why I'm saying anytime you're on a team, you build leadership skills, even if you're not the leader, right? Because working on a team requires coordinating with people and understanding where they're coming from and listening and communicating and all of those things. And I think those skills, there's a large amount of overlap in those skills. So I would say good team member is a good leader, right? Those things are.
And I'd support that, because dealing with a difficult person, whether you're a team member or a leader, it's the same set of skills you have to learn of how do I communicate with this person.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. I think that wraps up our event for this evening. I want to thank Kathy and Liz for joining us today and sharing your experiences and insights with us. Thank you to our audience for our great questions and attending this event. We'll follow up within the next week with the recorded video. Next up on Mud Talks, Vanessa will be back with our N+1 lessons I've learned through a decade in artificial learning with Professor George Montañez. That'll be on Tuesday, March 21st at 5 p.m. Pacific time. If you are interested in being a Mud Talk speaker, please contact alumni at hmc.edu. All future events can be found at our website, alumni.hmc.edu. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.